Got it. Well, good morning, everyone. Today we're doing another episode of The Three Amigos, and Ron has put together a package that will really help those of you who are struggling to be able to find and keep good people. It's a whole process on how to get the right person for the right job. I'm really excited about this. Ron does a great job, and their tools are very helpful in terms of making decisions that will improve your outcomes rather than hiring somebody and then having to let them go. So without further instruction or comment, Ron, go ahead and run us through this. This is going to be an exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Ray. Of course, this for those of you who stay kind of up with our proceedings here. This is a nice follow-up to what Ray did last week, and where he talked a little bit about screening. And this kind of continues on to another level of screening, which I'll explain here towards the end. What we're going to talk about in screening using the Orion is one of the things that you do in order to find you've got the right people. And as we talked about last week, by right people, part of it is you want to have people who are honest and won't steal from you. And so you can do assessments to determine that. Then you have the broader issue of a certain kind of a job that needs a certain kind of a person. And I think most of us agree, even in this political atmosphere, I think most of us agree that certain personalities, certain people just will not work in certain kinds of jobs. Now, if you use a real extreme job, somebody who likes to work outside and is invigorated by that and maybe doesn't really enjoy doing people, might make a really good contractor or a gardener or a variety of different jobs, perhaps a forest manager, something like that, as opposed to somebody who likes to work with other people, be in groups, do group interactions. They're going to find it much more satisfying to be working with people. And so that's just one aspect, and that has to do with how our personalities are as to whether or not we'll enjoy a job. If we enjoy a job, we're going to do a better job. And so trying to find something that actually fits the blessings of a person in terms of their individual characteristics and their differences, that just makes everybody else happier, and we get more done. And when we get more done, we can increase community wealth and do more things for more people. So it's all a good ending if we can just get the right people. Of course, there's a huge downside to getting the wrong people, or the ones who are not perfect. And that is that those individuals tend not to be having much fun. They tend to cause disruptions within the organization. They may not be competent at the job. In other words, they might be able, a really, really good accountant might be very good at doing data entry and so forth, but they may not be competent enough to close the books, for instance. That might be a skills shortage, but also if you can't stand to sit at one location for hours at a time because you have nervous energy, you like to get up and move around. I'm one of those people. I find that I think on my feet probably as well or better than sitting. You're going to have folks that just don't get the job done as well as maybe somebody across the room might be able to. So you have this huge mismatch of people and jobs. So let's kind of jump into this a little bit and talk about how to try and get rid of this mismatch. This, of course, is the three consulting amigos that you see before you on the screen, or it might just be me at this moment. I'm not sure how many of us are being recorded, but and so here we have a situation where we've got jobs, and whoops, I'm a screen behind here. So we have a situation where we've got these jobs, and they require, as I mentioned, many different skill levels. Then we also have people, and those people need to have skills that fit in with the team as well as be able to accomplish the job. Very much like trying to put, a little puzzle together, and that is that they all ideally kind of fit together. There are a whole lot of, when we talk about a job, there are a lot of different job requirements. One poll might be that one kind of a job might require not very much skill or experience to accomplish, and another one might be require very highly skilled with long experience, like a surgeon. Most of us who are going to get operated on want somebody who's really been there and done that before, whereas we may not be too worried about the person who's maybe picking up the leaves in the backyard. Now, those are two very, very different examples, but when you get inside a job, and that many of them are a little closer, and they're hard to separate. And then there are other ones as well. Another characteristic might be as I mentioned, some people like outside work, some like desk jobs. I have a son who loves to be outside. He has really a wonderful pool fence business. And you really can't get him to sit still for very long because he likes moving. He likes thinking about the geometry that's required to do that. He likes the business side. Don't ask him to sit at a desk for more than an hour or two. And there are a whole bunch of others. These different poles, high, low, small, big, different kinds of contradicting characteristics within the job itself that really require us to think through each job and determine what are those the skill levels required, what are some of the interpersonal issues that are required, what kind of attitude is important to get high performing people, and much more than that. So, but a job is actually much easier to define than a people. We're complicated. And as a result, it's a much more difficult issue to try and determine what kind of personality or what kind of person would fit a certain job. So I wanted to take a few more minutes to explain this particular aspect of the personality. Let me just say that I'm not a psychologist, but I played one on TV. But actually worked with a PhD psychologist for many years, another MBA who studied the personality tests for years. So I spent years working with some of these other professionals who do this. Ray has done a good deal of this kind of thing as well. And then we were trained, my wife was trained by a particular assessment, one that's called the 16PF, which we're going to talk about, to look at, interpret, and administer those tests. So that took a certification in order to do that. And we have been using the Hiring Smart, which I got from Phil McCrary, one of the gentlemen who I just mentioned. We really utilized his system for about over 20 years, 25 years perhaps. So we know from experience that by using this system, we get really exceptional results. It does work, and it does fit in with what the professional psychology community sees as part of the psychological profile. So to start, then I want to talk about what the psychology group thinks about personality. And they have what they call the Big Five personality traits. This is not 100% of the community. It's not pure science, but there are a group of those folks who use pure science to try and put this stuff together. The vast majority of psychologists today and organizations today agree that we have 5 personality traits, the big ones, and then they each have smaller traits within those 5 big traits. It is complicated. We're not going to have time to go into the smaller ones, but we're going to talk about the big 5. One of those is extroversion. And it is, I think a lot of people kind of know what extroversion means. The opposite of that is introversion. And it just has to do with how comfortable we are with being outspoken and out in the group versus being inside and enjoying working alone, that sort of thing. And so it's a pole, and it's important to remember that all these things are from one end to the other, basically. So introversion all the way on one side, extroversion all the way on the other side, and all these points in between, which happen to fit a standard normal distribution. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and we would consider that sort of average. So another one is agreeableness. This particular attribute has to do with whether or not you can get along with other people, or if you're kind of outward more spoken. Openness is another category, and this really tells a little bit about whether you kind of keep your cards to yourself or you just blurt out everything. On one end of the scale, you've got people who just cannot keep their mouth shut. If they think you're ugly, they're just going to say, "Oh my gosh, you're ugly." And so you can see when you get on one pole versus the other, you begin to get on really into sort of mental disorders. Not many of us fit in those. Conscientiousness is another one. This is been explained as Jordan Peterson is another PhD in psychology who I listen to extensively, and he's talked about the big five personality traits. Conscientiousness is sort of similar to paying attention to detail, to getting things done right. So you can see how many jobs this would be a good attribute. Doesn't make it good or bad in terms of a personality, but what it does mean is that if you've got, say, a machinist, and it has to have a certain precision, that a person who's conscientious will not stop until you hit those goals. So anything that has to do with numbers or measurement, or people for that matter, to be conscientious about getting it right is a very, very important part. That doesn't mean that in some societies conscientiousness really is that much of an advantage. But in our high-tech society, where most of our jobs have some technical kind of requirement, and the complexity of our society really requires that things mesh together. They have to fit. Everything's got to work. And if they don't work, things don't, the society doesn't work very well. So being highly conscientious is a very good attribute. So those folks who happen to be very high, way out here on what we call the long tail, those people find that they are generally more successful. Jordan Peterson has said that those people that this attribute, conscientiousness, along with intelligence or ability to learn, pick up new things quickly and process them quickly, are the two most important keys for success within our complex society. Those are important. And finally, we've got neuroticism. Now, I think we all know what that is, and right away you're going, "Oh man, I don't want to be neurotic." Well, no, you don't want to be neurotic, and because that's the pole way out there where you're too much one way versus too much the other way. But you can any time you fit way out on the poles, and there are only a few percentage points of you in your population, like 0.1 or even 0.5% way out, or when you score way high on either one of these poles, then what that means is that you really are falling outside of the norm on that particular personality big five trait. So with that, we're going to translate this into what I think is easier to understand. This happens to be, these are what they call global factors, 16PF, which is Performance Assessment Network, owns this set of personality assessments. What they've done is that they've used different words, but they're defining the same things. Here's extroversion. So extroversion, they call extroversion. So that's pretty easy to fit that. But here you see introverted on one pole, extroverted on the other pole. This is a sample evaluation, and this particular person happens to be about in the middle. 5 would be in the middle, or 5.5 would be in the middle, And so they're just a little bit more introverted than normal, which means that if you look back over here, that if you fit about right here, they're easily within one standard deviation. That would be 2 of these marks. And so this is really quite normal in here. And you can see the vast majority of people fit within this. This is like 70% of the people fit in the middle. So this person, even though they might score just a teeny bit below, would be considered real close to normal. Agreeableness they call independence in the global factors. And what this is are you very accommodating on one hand? You just kind of like a wet noodle, and anything that somebody tells you to do, it's like, yeah, oh yeah, sure, no problem, I'll do that. Versus being very independent. Independent people will stand up and say, no, I don't agree with that. Now, you can be too independent. You know, sometimes Ray thinks I'm a little too independent when I say what I believe. But again, we're all on this scale somewhere. I'm probably up in this range here, just a little bit outside of the normal standard deviation. But
Ron, I think I am too. So
yeah, yeah, you're right. I think you are too. So you get 2 independent people, and that's what you get, folks. You know.
yeah.
And this particular person is a little bit more accommodating, would, might be influenced by others a little bit more. But we all have attributes of both. I think that's the important thing. Openness, this is what they would call tough-mindedness, and this is to be receptive to new ideas. Or tough-minded would be, no, I'm not going to switch at all. We could probably talk about the political aspects of this particular trait, but for the most part, openness, if you're very, very receptive, that tends to correlate with being highly creative. Being highly creative is also associated with people like Steve Jobs and many other inventors who look at ideas and kind of push it to the limit. And if they happen to be independent at the same time and highly intelligent, these are some of the people who come up with these great ideas. The problem with that is that they tend to be jumping to all kinds of things. They're open to this idea, now they're open to that idea, now they're open to that idea. And so you don't want to be too far, again, on either one of these poles. But you need people who are open. But that doesn't lead to the kind of success that conscientiousness does. And in some ways, they're kind of opposite of each other. Somebody who's very, very conscientious is typically not terribly open. This particular person here is a little bit on the tough-minded side, not very close to the self-control. So in other words, they're a little bit unrestrained. This person would react to a new idea, but then they would go, that's really a terrible, stupid idea. I don't like it. Or, yeah, really, we got to do that. So the combination of how these work together ends up developing this profile. And finally, we've got neuroticism, which they call anxiety. It's a little maybe more politically correct term, but you can see that they've got low anxiety and high anxiety. So what that really means is, by neuroticism, it's not that you're neurotic, but you may have a lot of anxiety. I think this is an opinion. It's not based on fact, but I wouldn't be surprised if we found that there was a correlation between high anxiety and not showing up to work during COVID. People who are maybe very high in openness and receptive to ideas and listen to the news all the time may well cause themselves high anxiety and not come to work. So as far as I know, there have been no studies on this. Jordan Peterson has made comments on these kinds of relationships, which are very interesting. And I'm not suggesting that you should use this assessment to try and make these kinds of conclusions at all. This is about one person, one job, and we want to kind of stay focused on that. But you can see how interesting it is to really understand people. And of course, Ray has been beating that drum for 30 years or more. So,
Right.
so now just digging in a little bit deeper here. when we take a look, one of the things, among several others, one of the things we can look at is leadership. And that is, how does a particular person, how would they lead being put in that position, particular personality profile. In this particular case that we were just looking at, you can see that if they were put into a leadership role, they would tend to be a little bit more authoritarian. Excuse me, I shouldn't say that. They're a little bit less authoritarian. They're pretty much in the middle in terms of participative, and they would tend to err on the side of permissiveness. Now, is this person really a great leader? Hard to say, probably depends on the other people in the group. But I don't think you would find that most company leaders have this profile. These would be more workers. Company leaders are going to find they're going to be highly participative, much more authoritative, and much less permissive. So that, many leaders who are termed tyrants, they're leaders by the fact that they have those attributes in some cases, along with skill in a lot of other attributes as well. But then take a look at, well, if you're subordinate, you're not the leader, you're the follower. This person is low on integration. They're initiated, integrators. So they would not necessarily be able to put the pieces together, requiring, say, more work from the leader to get them up to speed because they just a teeny bit of pushback on them. They tend to be cooperative. So this is a person in the group, and they're right in the middle for free thinking. So this person works a lot better in a subordinate situation. If you take a look at them, the interaction between the two, they're in the middle for confrontive, which is probably good. You don't want patsies sitting around the table. Sometimes you've got people who are way too permissive. Somebody who's permissive is just not going to be very good in terms of helping a group go forward. Controlling, they're right in the middle, so they're going to be with most of the average people. They tend to be objective. This is very, very important in groups, and supportive. So this person would be really pretty good, mostly in a subordinate role, but in a group. So but leadership and the aspects of leadership is just one of the characteristics that can be measured by a really good assessment that is always the same, whether you take it when you're 25 or 35 or 40, or whether it's high stress or low stress. The good tests have been cross assessed for correlations to make sure that they stay that way all the time, and you're actually measuring real personality traits instead of how somebody is feeling at the moment, which can actually lead you astray. So how do we use these things? Well, we can find that certain kinds of, and this is where the rubber meets the road, certain kinds of personalities do fit better in certain kinds of jobs. So if you can get them to fit together, you're going to have a better performing team as a whole. So when we understand the success that this particular success rate, it helps you understand why assessment is very important. Phil McCreary used to have a really great graphic that was basically explaining this kind of assessment about what do we know about people with an iceberg. And as we all know, an iceberg, what's the ratio? It's only 1/7 or 1/8 above the surface, and the rest is all below the water level. Well, that's personality. When you meet somebody, you're only seeing, a small part of who they are. It's until you get to know them that you begin to dig down and find out who they really are. What this kind of assessment does, the really good ones, help you understand who they are so much faster, so much better, so much deeper, so that you're going to make fewer mistakes. Hiring mistakes are really expensive. And so we want to try and avoid that if possible. If you can do it really well, people who are happy in their job will make everybody else happy. They'll enjoy going to work. It'll be fun for them, and they will perform at a higher level. There's almost no upside to having people that don't fit the job that fits their personality. So, for instance, a librarian would not really enjoy working outside in the cold on a construction site on most days. A construction worker is rarely going to enjoy being in a cubicle working with numbers all day long. So I think you can see that, and it's much more subtle. There are different pieces of different jobs that maybe require several modes, but people who fit closer are going to be happier. So how do we actually accomplish this? One way, oops, let's see, did I miss the slide? Yeah, okay, yes, here we go. Sorry, a little behind. Okay, so what we do is we're looking at a funnel, really. So if you have to pour a lot of people in the top of the funnel in order to get a few people at the bottom.
The slide did not change.
It didn't change.
No.
Yeah.
Still in leadership. There it is.
Did it change now?
Yes, now I see the funnel.
Okay, good, good. So we pour them in at the top and we have them come out at the bottom. You might, people don't like this, they don't like to hear this, but you might want to pour 10 people in the top in order to get one out of the bottom. One good one out of the bottom. Now, the interesting thing is that as Ray went through last time, and you might want to look at this video if you enjoyed this one. Look at the last one because he talked about this first level, and that is to assess for honesty and theft. It's a very simple, very straightforward assessment that can give you a really, really good idea as to the attitudes of an individual person. Would they tend to steal from you, or would they never steal from you, or are they somewhere in between who look to the outside people that are with them for their sense of morality, I guess. So you can get rid of quite a group of people on the, and I don't mean that to sound flip, like you get rid of, that's not the point, but there are people who don't fit this. And I think, Ray, didn't we talk about roughly a third are ones that would never steal from you, somewhere in that range?
I don't remember exactly, but yeah, there. You know, the thing is that with the database that was validated for the Orion, you know, clearly showed that there was a high correlation between people who said, "Look, I stole from my employer," and people who responded that way on the test. So there was a 90% correlation, which means that, you know, you can use this information to make decisions as to whether this person is a good fit or not. And I
Right,
guess
right.
that's where you're going with this.
So I think that there's a fairly high group of people. I believe there are just as many people who will take from you as won't. And so you're going to get rid of, you know, if it happened to be a third, and a third, you're going to find that only a third of the people are going to actually make it through this particular hoop. So now you've eliminated a whole group of people who are either would steal with people around them who steal, or are going to steal no matter what. But there would be a third, we'll say roughly a third of the people, and I'm sure it's different for different places and different jobs, but roughly a third of the people would be left. So now you see you've cut it way down. And so when you start going through your process and doing the second important thing, which is to determine if they have the right skill levels, now you only have a third of them to go through, and you're going to take all of those people out who've applied that don't have the required skill levels. Now this assumes you've done a really good skill assessment. A lot of small business people, and large businesses for that matter, do a lousy job at assessing what the actual skills for a lot of success in each job is. Many times they just add on, well, they should be a college graduate. And the three of us know that's just absurd. You know, okay, it might be important in a certain case, but all they're doing is trying to apply an artificial hoop to jump through because they're trying to eliminate candidates. And they just automatically assume that somebody who's been to college has maybe a little smarter, maybe can catch on a little bit better, maybe more qualified to write or to compute or whatever that they think might be. But there's no correlation anymore. Too many colleges are graduating people who are not competent in the things that we used to consider competence. I think you could fairly say you say when we graduated along many decades ago, that anybody who graduated from a good college would be able to put together a reasonable sentence. I don't think you can say that anymore. There are all kinds of people who just can't write at all.
Yep.
And so, it's literally possible to get through college and not be able to draft a coherent letter. So, this doesn't apply anymore. It was an old way to try and determine whether or not they'd have the skills for the job. It's not a good way. If they have an engineering degree, okay, that may say something about those jobs that truly require an engineering degree. But look how much engineering is done in manufacturing, for instance, with people who don't need to know the theory. They just need to be good at figuring stuff out.
Mhm.
Don't put an engineer in a situation like that. Many engineers have never used their hands. They don't even know how to screw a screw in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fairly amazing, but I know this to be true. So you can't just assume that a degree is going to fix the problem. But a good skills assessment is really important. We don't have time to go into that, but that might be something, a future program.
Yeah.
So you're going to get rid of X number of people because they don't have the skills you require. Then you finally get to the place to where you do the assessment. What we've been talking about in this particular case, the 16PF, and there are the others. This particular personality assessment does what we just talked about so that you can eliminate a few more people and select the best ones. When you're done with this process, you should only interview 3 people, the 3 best. Now, what do you do at the interview? You ask them questions that are about their skills and about their circumstantial behavior based on what you found out in the personality assessment. You'll find that they may feel a little bit weak to you, and therefore that's a question. You can use those questions in order to determine whether or not they would be able to work around a certain place. Don't interview them as if you know everything. Almost nobody knows how to interview. Dr. Trafton, the gentleman who I had mentioned earlier, worked with for 5 years. He's adamant about this. The research shows, and I remember the numbers, the research shows that just a regular interviewer, somebody who interviews, maybe a supervisor, maybe they interview 20, 10 people, 5 people a year. They have zero effect on the success of that person in the job. It's actually 1%. 1% effect. A really good interviewer that does this all the time and is a professional has a 5% impact on the success of that job. Why interview at all? Well, the answer is you want to make sure, many jobs, it's important that they can say dress well. It might be important that they don't have tattoos or body piercings or something like that in certain kinds of jobs. There are, you just want to make sure that they sort of will get the job done. Many jobs don't require that at all, and so you don't worry about that aspect. You may worry about other aspects. So you want to make sure that that person is the person that in fact you have assessed and that you have done your work on. But other than that, you simply want to focus on who they are based on the personality assessment. Now you've got an interview and you select the best of the 3. And that's what makes it successful. And as a result of that, you can actually do a better job of putting people together with their piece of the pie or the puzzle in the right place at the right time. So what do you get? What are the advantages of this? As we've mentioned kind of through this, happier people, better performance. People will stay a little longer, maybe a lot longer. You have a stronger team building opportunity. You don't make so many hiring mistakes. I have seen companies that make about 30% hiring mistakes or more. That's a common problem. And of course, management time is very valuable, and they spend an awful lot of it doing meaningless interviewing. That is not something that they should spend much time at. And of course, having a better understanding for all the skills and the training also allows them to kind of feel as though you'll give them advancement opportunities when in fact they earn it. Now, what do you guys have other kinds of advantages to getting the hiring job right? Let's open it up and kind of just have a general
Well,
conversation.
I have two questions, and I think it leads to people hiring the wrong people from time to time, and it's not really covered here per se. And that is number one, cost. A lot of people are trying to find somebody at the least cost, and that's what they focus on rather than focusing on the potential of what that person can do. And I think it leads to a lot of bad decisions. Sometimes paying more and you get so much more for that extra investment. But unfortunately, we're all focused on a budget or some type of cost number that we think is right for the position. So I think pricing the position out for the right talent is really important up front.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I agree completely. Some people have said, I don't know if this is true, rule of thumb, it costs about a third of somebody's salary to hire them. I have not found that to be exactly true, but the reason is that when we've helped all of these clients do the hiring, we didn't charge them, a percentage of the salary, and so we were able to do hiring that was more in the range of 5 to 10% of the salary. So it's somewhere between, say, 10 and 30% of the cost to do that. But boy, are you right on the button, Ed, because a bad hire can cost you a huge amount of money. And I'll give you a quick example. I have a client in the Midwest that recently, and they have hiring issues. They use this quite a bit most of the time, but every once in a while, the supervisor will think they know more, and they kind of fall outside of the bounds of the hiring smart process. And they literally, because things are so tough right now, they literally have just ignored the assessments and hired somebody anyway because they had to have a body to put in that particular position. Well, at this moment, they're going through a threat from a hire because this particular person felt as though they were being discriminated against. Now, they feel like they have done everything well enough to be able to protect themselves. But the point is that as we went back through and actually Molly looked through the assessments, this person was actually almost, we could not have predicted that this would have happened, but this person was much more likely to have done it. And they didn't do an Orion on this person. And so you had someone who potentially came into the company with the express intent to defraud in the employment process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was going to add to that, Ron. I think one of the things that I've found very effective about the Orion, it not only lets you know whether they are have a history of maybe theft, but more importantly, it gives you some of the questions that even Ed was asking about. It creates an interview that permits you to ask about their attitudes about supervision and other things, which you can use during the interview process to more clearly ask questions that are specifically related to that candidate's behavior.
Right.
Which I think is most interviews are kind of a beauty contest,
Yeah, right.
The candidate's saying one thing and the company saying another to kind of attract one another.
Yeah. And those people with a certain personality who present well are outgoing, and you instantly like them, and you just think, oh, this would be a great person. That has absolutely nothing to do with their competence at whatever the job might be.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, if they happen to be running machinery in a plant, how did that interview help them do a better job running machinery? Where the more talking they do, the more mistakes are made. So, I
Yeah.
mean, actually, the interview process sells the individual person, and it has nothing to do with what they're actually going to do. So that happens
Yeah,
over and over and over. Yeah.
And to kind of piggyback on what Ed said, one of the things that I've said is that most organizations tend to hire what they can afford, but they never get the talent they need.
Oh, that's good.
Well said. And
Yeah.
I got to tell you guys, in my history and my experience, every time I paid more for somebody who I thought was worth it, it paid dividends. I don't have any negative stories of picking someone who wanted more than what I was offering, turning out bad. However, on the other side, a lot of people that I was trying to hire at a lower cost turned out to be, they fizzled out and didn't accomplish much at all and had high turnover. And we were out there looking for the same position again 6 months later.
Right. And
And
so the
I'd
APWA,
add this, Ron, Ed of the three of us probably has the most hiring experience given his role, and I think that's really valuable because, he's done so much hiring. I think these tools would have helped you, Ed, along the way.
Oh,
Avoid some of
absolutely.
the mistakes that, are so common in the people we speak with.
The
Yeah.
other issue that isn't mentioned here, and there is really a strong bias out there, and I think a lot of people miss out on great opportunities, and that is age. And for some reason, people are really apprehensive of hiring anybody over 50 for leadership positions. And to me, they're missing out on the greatest potential of all, because even if you hire somebody who's, say, 60 or 65 years of age, and their goal is to bring in somebody and train somebody for that position, that probably is a much better approach than just going out and trying to hire somebody
yeah.
without all the necessary experience necessary to do the job.
Right.
That's a good point. And of course, I think, and it brings up, a serious issue, and that is that the good assessments, of which there are not that many, but the good assessments are not looking at people's age, their
Good point.
gender. They're not looking at anything about them that is, say, they're born with. They're looking only at their capabilities and the personality and the job. And so in a system like this, if someone came along and they happen to be a little bit older, and in your mind you thought you needed someone younger, they're not eliminated because of their age. If they fit the profile, they're going to end up with the interview. Now,
Right,
you might say this person's too old, but in fact, that's illegal. And so you don't want to come up with that. You don't want to say, well, this person's too old. You only really, you just want to, and many of these will hold up in court, by the way, because you're just looking at, can the person do the job? Forget their race, forget their age.
Very good point, Ron. So how do they avoid the law? They don't invite the people that have a certain age into the process. So they miss out on a great opportunity.
Well, yeah, they do miss out. And of course, what this does is this allows those people through. So they manage to get through the smart hiring process, whereas somebody along the way might have eliminated. Now, think about a company where you have supervisors who are starting their process through the interview. They are potentially subconsciously eliminating certain people who should not be eliminated. Not only is that wrong and unethical, but it means that you're missing a large percentage of the good working population. And isn't that exactly what we're attempting to do? We want people to be able to advance based on their performance. This is how things work. It's what's made us the wealthiest country in the world, is this whole idea. It's just that we haven't been very good at it.
No, I think you're right. And I think one of the challenges, we've talked about this in other contexts, but, as you move through that chain, you run into people's, desirability biases and their confirmation biases. In other words, I've never seen a woman who can do a good job at this, so as a consequence, I'm not going to hire them, or vice versa. It could be a racial thing, or as Ed pointed out, it's an age bias, and each of those in their own way could be eliminating a person who's the best fit for the job.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true.
The best way of summarizing is biases. They prevent you from hiring really good people. whatever the
That's right.
bias is.
No, that's exactly right. And so it takes the bias away I mean, you can't get rid of all of it, I suppose, in terms of people reflecting on someone who they've met. You're going to still have some people making decisions. But what this does is this will allow a person who's fit for a particular job to get to the interview,
Right.
so that at least they have been reduced to 1 out of 2 or 3 instead of 1 out of 20.
Yeah.
If you have a whole bunch of people lined up and all you're doing is looking at them, the average person is probably going to miss the top 3 people. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that the average person will not be able to pick say 2 out of the 3 people that would end up with the process, going through a more regimented, skilled, and in detailed process of finding out who fits that job.
Well, I think the example you cited of your client in the Midwest, it's like, well, I don't really need that. And, it's always been ironic to me, the Orion, depending on how many you buy, can be anywhere from $20 to $35, and it's like, I can't afford that. How am I going to spend that? And the point is that if we run them through the process you just described for us, we're not talking about getting 10 people. We're talking about only doing this with 3.
Well, right.
You're
so
at the point now you're saying, I need to know whether I really want to move ahead with this person.
So if you've got $25 times, say, 10 people, now you spent $250. You've got some labor involved in the skills assessment kind of thing. And then also you only have 3 people or 4 people, 5 people left at maybe $100 for a serious assessment. And now you only spend another $250 to $500. So your actual material cost is way less than $1,000.
Right.
And I can bet you that the people involved in hiring have spent, you've spent way more than $1,000 on the people who are doing the interviews, because they spend hours and hours and hours interviewing people.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a foolish way to hire, and it's really too bad that this kind of thing isn't a broader. In the business owners don't take this seriously. It is successful. I've watched it with my own eyes. I hired 20, 30 people a year in the retail business. It was abysmal. We had a horrible turnover rate. We didn't know what we were doing. But in the last 20 years in using this system, we only had one single person that made it through that was a terrible hire. The rest all stayed and did, So, I mean, we literally had about a 4% washout, and that particular person was under huge duress and was handling deposits and so forth. And so was just too, didn't want to steal the money, but she was too stressed out, and she did. But we found her immediately, and she was fired, etc. Did all of that kind of thing. But literally, in all those years, 25 years, that was the only problem we had. And the performance was fabulous. So I've seen it work in my own, and of course, we've helped clients with hundreds of hires, and we just see that the performance of this thinking is really top notch.
Right. No, I think it's important. And I think, one of the observations you made about fraud, it's as Ed, probably, from your own experience, but, the people that end up defrauding a company are not the people you would anticipate. It can many times be that sweet little old lady who has access to money over the years, and suddenly she realizes, oh my God, I'm really short on money, and I know the system, and just if I take a little bit, nobody's ever going to notice, right?
I can tell you story after story of people that I worked with in my career that you would never anticipate having an honesty problem with. And one in particular stole millions of dollars from a big company.
Wow.
Got away with it. It was one of the anointed ones in the company. And so I go back, and this is really good for identifying people up front, but even with hiring practices like this, you really need good internal controls in a company.
Yes.
You have checks and balances, because I think I think the possibility of, if you had 9 out of 10 people sitting in office, you had $100 bills in the corner unaccounted for, just sitting there. I wonder how many of those 100 people would take some of that money. It's without controls. People get they get ideas that they shouldn't. So
Right.
it's really important. And I think in the future show we need to talk a little bit about internal controls.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a great idea. I can give you an example. I was working for a garage door installation company, and he was trying to make a point about how sometimes people don't realize the cost of what's going on. You know, there was a garage door install a box of, you know, which was worth $100, and it was literally sitting by the same spot for more than a week and a half. And finally, he just put $100 bill on it and wanted to see how long it would take somebody to notice it. Well, that didn't take more than 10 minutes before somebody says, "My God, there's a $100 bill there." He says, "Exactly. It's been sitting there for a week and a half, and you guys just leave it there."
Yeah, that's great. Well, and of course, spending 15 years in the retail business, I had hundreds of thousands of dollars of merchandise available to employees on a constant basis.
Right.
So controls were a very important part of that. And even so many years ago, we had inventory systems and checkout systems that would balance everything that was sold with the inventory every day.
Right.
Something that was unheard of in those days because it was all done semi-manually, just with an adding machine. So that helped keep those people a little bit on the honest side. However,
Right.
I will tell you that the guy who did the best job with the interview that we thought was absolutely fabulous and was really going to help us out a lot was hired as a manager. He's the guy that took us to the bank.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Big time. So, and I remember his name. I won't mention it, but he took us. He took us big time, and everybody else. People had stores in that particular mall. Somehow they knew that the whole time, and we were just so enamored with him that it took us months to figure it out.
Wow.
Let me ask you this, Ron. How important is knowing the culture to the hiring process from your experience in hiring people?
I don't know if I can answer that really with any kind of definitive answer. I will say that in the retail business, we use culture and brand to a very great extent in order to be able to get enough good candidates to apply. And that was really important because we could not have competed otherwise. We didn't even come close to being able to pay salaries like the department store salaries. So when we realized we're doing such a terrible job and we started working on the culture, we found that people within the company were the ones who were bringing in their friends because they enjoyed working there. And
Yeah.
we started training programs, and we made it very apparent that you can become an assistant manager, you can become a manager. And we told them up front, we don't have enough positions for all of you to become managers. And therefore, when you're trained up and we help you understand this particular business, when you get a better job, we're not going to be upset with you when you leave and you take a better job. We're going to train you to get a better job because we can't pay more. So that's how we did it, and that worked out pretty effectively.
I want to, when I was working with the director of HR at Nokia, one of the things that he observed was that they found that, they had to be very careful about, being too enamored with technical skills because they realized that 90 days in the future, they would be letting somebody go because they weren't suitable for the company and the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
the part of the interview process was to make sure that those skills that they saw that were so relevant would be a good fit for where they were going later. So, to that degree, Ed, that's really important. And, I think the purpose of these assessment tools is to weed out people who are not suitable for your organization.
Right.
I do think the culture is extremely important. And I can think of one really highly qualified person I hired in the past. who was outstanding in what he was doing, he almost created miracles on financial statements, didn't fit in with the rest of the company. And everything that he did was second guessed, and his a lot of finger pointing towards him, and it just never fit in. And unfortunately, we had to let him go, and it was probably one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, because he was so good at what he did, but he didn't fit the culture of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Having said that, guys, it's after 10, and I know, Ron, you said that you have another appointment that you have to go to.
Something coming up afterwards. So, and I think we're pretty well covered it. So,
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Ed, I like the idea of internal controls. I have another assessment, but we've been discussing assessments. I think, are you open to being able to do something on how you applied?
I would love to do something on internal controls. I think they're so important. And in particular, there's an organization called COSO that came out about 10 years ago and came up with like 27 key controls and then they expanded to like 100 different controls in an organization that are necessary so that people know that the financial statements are accurate. So I think it would be very valuable to go through an exercise like that.
No, that'd be great. Well, I want to thank the three of you again, or the two of you and me, I guess would be the fair way of describing that. And I thought this was a very good. Thank you, Ron. I'm hoping that people who are watching see the value of this. So